Lonely human miner finds an alien girl hanging from a pole with a sign, "The Baron never forgives." The harsh winds of Proxima 4 howled across the barren wasteland, carrying dust that could strip paint from a shuttle hull. In this forgotten corner of the galaxy, only the desperate or the damned made their home. Malcolm Reed was both. The old miner trudged through the alien grit, his weathered boots leaving deep impressions in the rust-colored soil. 63 years of hard living had carved deep lines into his face, like the very rock he'd spent his life extracting. His once black hair had surrendered to a steely gray, cropped close to his skull beneath a battered helmet. "Another day in paradise," he muttered to himself, the words lost in the howling wind. The Proxima Mining Company settlement was little more than a collection of prefabricated structures huddled against the constant assault of the elements. Malcolm had called it home for 15 years, longer than most lasted in this hellhole. He preferred the solitude of the mines to the complications of human interaction. Out here, a man could disappear, could outrun his past, or at least pretend to. As he crested the ridge that led back to the settlement, something caught his eye, a flicker of movement where there should be none. Malcolm squinted against the swirling dust, his hand instinctively moving to the plasma cutter at his belt. What in the seven hells? There, silhouetted against the blood-red sunset, was a figure hanging from one of the abandoned communication poles. Malcolm's heart hammered against his ribs as he quickened his pace, years of solitary caution warring with basic human decency. As he drew closer, the details emerged through the haze. It wasn't a human. The proportions were wrong. The figure was slender, feminine, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the dying light. Long silver-white hair whipped around in the wind. An alien. A cerulean. Her arms were bound above her head, suspending her from the pole. Her body was draped in nothing but tattered rags that barely preserved her modesty against the harsh elements. Even from a distance, Malcolm could see the bruises and wounds that marred her delicate skin. But it was the sign nailed beside her that made his blood run cold. "The Baron never forgives." "Damn it all," Malcolm growled, breaking into a run despite his aching joints. The Baron. Everyone in the settlement knew who that was. Drex Morden, a Taurian loan shark who'd set up shop in the settlement years ago. The alien crime lord had a stranglehold on half the miners through debt, and those who couldn't pay faced his unique brand of justice. Malcolm reached the pole and assessed the situation. The cerulean woman was barely conscious, her large almond-shaped eyes fluttering as she struggled to focus on him. "Hold on, I'm getting you down," he said, pulling his utility knife from his belt. Her voice was barely a whisper, melodic despite her condition. "Please, help." Malcolm cut through the bindings, catching her as she collapsed into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, her body trembling against his. "I've got you," he said, awkwardly patting her shoulder. It had been years since he'd held anyone, let alone a woman. "What's your name?" "Lena," she managed, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Malcolm glanced around nervously. Helping her meant crossing the Baron, something no sane person in the settlement would do, but leaving her to die wasn't an option he could live with. "I'm Malcolm Reed." He wrapped his worn jacket around her shoulders. "Let's get you somewhere safe." His small prefab unit sat at the edge of the settlement, as isolated as possible while still technically being part of the community. Malcolm had chosen it specifically for its distance from others. Now that isolation might save both their lives. As he carried Lena toward his home, Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully constructed solitude was about to be shattered. The Baron never forgave, and Malcolm had just made himself an enemy of the most dangerous being on Proxima 4. "What did you do to piss him off?" Malcolm asked as they approached his dwelling. Lena's eyes, the color of twilight, met his. "I tried to leave." "No one leaves the Baron's service." Malcolm grunted. He understood that sentiment all too well. Some chains were harder to break than others. The door to his unit slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the sparse interior. A single room with a bed, a small kitchen area, and a table with 2 chairs, one of which had never been used. The walls were bare except for a faded photograph of Earth's Grand Canyon, a reminder of a home he'd never see again. He gently laid Lena on his bed, then rummaged through his med kit for antiseptic and bandages. "This might sting," he warned as he began cleaning her wounds. Lena winced but remained stoic. "Why are you helping me?" Malcolm paused, the question catching him off guard. Why was he helping her? It certainly wasn't the smart play. The Baron would come looking for her, and when he did, Malcolm's peaceful existence would end. "Because it's the right thing to do," he finally said, surprising himself with the simple truth of it. As he tended to her injuries, Malcolm couldn't help but notice the graceful lines of her alien features. Ceruleans were rare in this part of the galaxy, known for their empathic abilities and artistic culture. What was she doing in a mining hellhole like Proxima 4? "You're a long way from the Cerulean system," he observed. A shadow crossed her face. "The Baron collects exotic things. I was acquired." The implication turned Malcolm's stomach. Slavery was technically illegal throughout the United Systems, but out here on the frontier, laws were more like suggestions. "Well, you're not his property anymore," Malcolm said firmly, finishing the bandaging. "You can stay here until you're healed up. Then we'll figure out what to do next." Lena's eyes widened. "You don't understand. He'll come for me. For us. The Baron never forgives." "Yeah, I saw the sign." Malcolm stood up, his knees cracking in protest. "I've been running from things my whole life, Lena. I'm too old and too tired to run anymore." He moved to the small kitchen area and began preparing a simple meal. "You should rest. Food will be ready soon." As Lena drifted into an exhausted sleep, Malcolm sat heavily in his chair, staring at the alien woman who had upended his carefully constructed isolation. For 15 years, he'd avoided entanglements, kept his head down, and minded his own business. Now, with one impulsive act of decency, he'd painted a target on his back. "The Baron never forgives." The words echoed in his mind as he watched the rise and fall of Lena's chest. Whatever storm was coming, Malcolm would face it. Some things were worth fighting for, even at his age. Outside, the winds of Proxima 4 howled their warning, carrying dust and secrets across the barren landscape. In the distance, the lights of the settlement flickered like uncertain stars. Unaware that the balance of power was about to shift, Malcolm woke before dawn, his body conditioned by years of early shifts. For a moment, he lay still, puzzled by the unfamiliar weight pressing against his side. Then the events of the previous evening came rushing back. Lena was curled against him, her silver-white hair spilling across his chest. He'd offered her the bed and planned to sleep in his chair, but she'd insisted they share the narrow cot, afraid to be alone. Her skin radiated a gentle warmth that Malcolm found oddly comforting after years of sleeping in solitude. Carefully, he extricated himself without waking her. She needed rest to heal. As he moved about the small dwelling, preparing for his shift, Malcolm couldn't help but steal glances at the sleeping Cerulean. In the soft light of morning, her bruises seemed more pronounced against her pale blue skin, stirring a protective anger in his chest. "Damn Baron," he muttered, pulling on his work boots. A soft knock at the door froze him mid-motion. Nobody visited Malcolm. Ever. He'd made sure of that. He grabbed his plasma cutter and approached the door cautiously. "Who is it?" "It's Grix," came the gravelly reply. "Open up, Reed. We need to talk." Malcolm relaxed slightly. Grix was an old Palladian, one of the few beings in the settlement Malcolm might cautiously call a friend. They'd worked the same section of mine for years, watching each other's backs when the tunnels got dicey. He opened the door just enough to slip outside, blocking any view of his interior. Grix's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of agitation in his species. "You've stepped in it now, human," Grix rumbled, his rocky skin catching the early morning light. "The Baron's men are tearing apart the settlement looking for his property." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "She's not property." "Tell that to the Taurian," Grix's lower eyes narrowed. "They've been asking questions, offering rewards for information. It won't be long before someone points them this way." "Let them come," Malcolm said, though his hand tightened on the plasma cutter. Grix made a sound like stones grinding together, a Palladian laugh. Still the stubborn human. "I admire your species' backbone. But this isn't a fight you can win alone. I'm not asking anyone to fight for me. Good, because I'm not offering. Grix leaned closer. But I am offering to help you hide her. My dwelling has a storage compartment beneath the floor. The Baron's men have already searched my place. They won't come back. Malcolm studied his alien friend, surprised by the offer. Why would you risk it? Because humans aren't the only ones who hate bullies, Grix replied simply. And because you saved my life in Tunnel 9 last year. Palladians pay their debts. Before Malcolm could respond, a commotion from the center of the settlement caught their attention. 3 hulking figures were moving from dwelling to dwelling, their distinctive horned silhouettes unmistakable. Taurian enforcers, Grix growled. They're working their way out from the center. You have maybe 20 minutes. Malcolm nodded grimly. I appreciate the offer, but I can't put you at risk. I'll figure something out. Stubborn human, Grix muttered. Fine, but take this. He pressed a small device into Malcolm's hand. Emergency beacon. If things go bad, activate it. I'll come running. Thanks, old friend. As Grix lumbered away, Malcolm slipped back inside. Lena was awake, sitting up in bed with fear evident in her twilight eyes. They're looking for me, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, the Baron's men are searching the settlement. Malcolm moved quickly, gathering supplies. We need to move you somewhere safe. There is no safe place, Lena said, her melodic voice tinged with despair. The Baron's reach extends everywhere on this planet. Malcolm paused, struck by a sudden idea. Not everywhere. He helped Lena to her feet, noting how she winced at the movement. Can you walk? She nodded, determination replacing fear. I can do whatever I must. Malcolm grabbed his emergency pack, water, rations, basic medical supplies, and slung it over his shoulder. There's an abandoned section of the mine. Collapsed 3 years ago made it too unstable for operations, but I know a way in. The company's sensors don't monitor it anymore. Won't they notice if you miss your shift? Lena asked, pulling Malcolm's jacket tighter around her slender frame. I've never missed a day in 15 years. I've earned 1 sick day. He checked the charge on his plasma cutter. Besides, I need to be with you. The tunnels can be tricky if you don't know them. A hint of a smile touched Lena's lips. Oh, you're risking everything for a stranger. Malcolm shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Let's just say I know what it's like to be hunted. He led her to the back of his dwelling where a maintenance panel concealed an emergency exit, standard in all prefab units, though most residents forgot they existed. Outside, the harsh landscape of Proxima 4 stretched before them, bathed in the eerie light of dawn. Stay low and follow me, Malcolm instructed. The ridge will give us cover until we reach the abandoned shaft. As they moved through the alien terrain, Malcolm found himself acutely aware of Lena's presence behind him. Her footsteps were nearly silent, her movements graceful despite her injuries. There was something almost ethereal about her, so at odds with the brutal reality of the mining settlement. They had covered about half the distance to the abandoned shaft when Lena suddenly grabbed Malcolm's arm, pulling him down behind an outcropping of rocks. What is it? He whispered. Patrol drone, she breathed, pointing to a small object hovering in the distance. The Baron uses them to monitor the perimeter. Malcolm cursed under his breath. The Baron's resources were more extensive than he'd realized. Can it detect us here? Its sensors are primarily visual. If we remain still, it may pass us by. They huddled together behind the rocks, barely breathing as the drone made its sweep. Malcolm was intensely conscious of Lena pressed against him, her scent reminiscent of something like lavender, but with an alien undertone he couldn't place. After what seemed an eternity, the drone continued its patrol route, moving away from their position. That was close, Malcolm muttered. Lena's twilight eyes met his. This is only the beginning, Malcolm read. The Baron will never stop hunting me. Her hand found his, her touch sending an unexpected warmth through his weathered body. There's still time for you to return me to him. Save yourself. Malcolm squeezed her hand gently. Not a chance. Now come on. We've got a mine to reach before those Taurian goons figure out we've flown the coop. As they resumed their trek across the harsh landscape, Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irrevocably changed. After 15 years of careful isolation, he was now a fugitive alongside a mysterious alien woman he barely knew. Yet somehow it felt right, like he was finally doing something that mattered. The abandoned mine shaft loomed ahead, a dark mouth in the face of the ridge. Safety, at least for now. But Malcolm harbored no illusions. This was just the beginning of their troubles. The abandoned mine shaft provided a welcome respite from the harsh Proxima 4 environment. Malcolm led Lena through a series of narrow tunnels, the beam from his helmet lamp cutting through darkness untouched for years. The air was stale but breathable, with a distinctive mineral scent that had become as familiar to Malcolm as his own heartbeat. Not much further, he assured her, noting how she favored her left side. Her injuries were healing, but not fast enough. They emerged into a larger chamber where the ceiling had partially collapsed, creating a natural alcove sheltered from the main tunnel. Malcolm had discovered this place during the initial surveys, before the company deemed the area too unstable for profitable extraction. "Home sweet home," he said, setting down his pack. "At least for now." Lena looked around, her twilight eyes adjusting quickly to the dim light. "You know these tunnels well." "I should. Spent more time down here than up there." Malcolm began unpacking supplies, laying out a thermal blanket on the relatively smooth section of floor. "Sit. Rest. You need to conserve your strength." She obeyed, watching him with curious intensity as he set up a small portable heater. The soft blue glow illuminated her features, highlighting the elegant contours of her face. "You're different from the other humans in the settlement," she observed. Malcolm snorted. "Not hard to be. Most of them are either company drones or desperate souls running from something." "And which are you, Malcolm Reed?" He paused, caught by the directness of her question. For a moment he considered deflecting, as he had for 15 years whenever anyone got too curious about his past. But something in Lena's gaze made him reconsider. "I guess I'm one of the runners," he admitted, sitting down across from her, "though I prefer to think of it as a strategic retreat." "What were you retreating from?" Malcolm sighed, feeling the weight of memories long suppressed. "I was a military man. United Earth Special Forces, saw action in the Orion conflict, the Procyon dispute, 23 years of service." Lena's eyes widened. "You were a warrior." "I was a soldier," he corrected. "There's a difference. At least, there's supposed to be." He fell silent, lost in recollection. The heat from the portable unit created a small pocket of warmth in the otherwise cool chamber, a physical comfort that contrasted with the emotional discomfort of revisiting his past. "What happened?" Lena prompted gently. Malcolm met her gaze. "My last mission. We were sent to extract a high-value target from a contested settlement on Rigel 7. Intelligence said he was developing biological weapons. My team was ordered to eliminate everyone in the compound." He paused, his weathered hands clenching involuntarily. "When we got there, we found families. Children. The target was a doctor developing vaccines for a local plague. Our intelligence was wrong or deliberately falsified. I refused the order to fire." Malcolm's voice grew harder. "My commanding officer didn't appreciate the insubordination. He was going to proceed anyway. We fought. He died." Lena reached out, her slender blue fingers resting lightly on his calloused hand. "You saved innocent lives and became a fugitive. Military tribunal declared me a traitor. I've been running ever since." He shrugged. "Ended up here." "Nobody asked questions on Proxima 4. "Until now," she said softly. Malcolm managed a wry smile. "Until now?" A comfortable silence fell between them. Malcolm was surprised at how easily the truth had flowed after years of careful concealment. There was something about Lena that invited confidence. "Your people, the Ceruleans," he said, changing the subject. "I've heard you're empaths." A shadow crossed her face. "Yes, we sense emotions, sometimes thoughts if they're strong enough. It's why the Baron—" She trailed off. "Wanted you," Malcolm finished. "You could tell when someone was lying about being able to pay." She nodded. "Among other uses. My abilities made me valuable to him, but they're also why I had to escape. Feeling the pain and fear of others day after day." Lena shuddered. "It was destroying me from within." Malcolm felt a surge of protective anger. "He won't get you back. I promise you that." You would face the Baron for me? A stranger? You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Malcolm said, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of her hand still resting on his. Lena's eyes, luminous in the dim light, searched his face. No, I suppose not. There was a shift in the air between them, a tension that hadn't been there before. Malcolm found himself noticing details he'd been too preoccupied to register earlier. The subtle curve of her lips, the graceful line of her neck, the way her silver-white hair caught the blue light from the heater. In my culture, Lena said softly, we believe that souls recognize each other across lifetimes. Perhaps that's why I trusted you immediately. Malcolm felt a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the portable heater. It had been so long since he'd felt anything like this. This pull, this connection to another being. I'm not sure what your soul saw in mine, he said gruffly. I'm just an old soldier with too many regrets. I see courage, Lena countered, moving closer. Honor, compassion, rare qualities in any species. Her hand moved to his face, fingers tracing the lines etched by time and hardship. Malcolm remained perfectly still, afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over them. Ceruleans express gratitude differently than humans, she murmured, her face now inches from his. Is that right? Malcolm's voice was rough with emotion long dormant. We believe in the sharing of life force, Lena explained, her breath warm against his skin. The joining of energies. Malcolm swallowed hard. Sounds intense. A smile played at her lips. It can be. Would you like me to show you? The rational part of Malcolm's mind, the part that had kept him alive as a fugitive for 15 years, screamed caution. But another part, a part he'd thought long dead, responded to the invitation in Lena's eyes. I would, he answered honestly. What followed transcended physical attraction. In the blue-lit darkness of the abandoned mine, Malcolm experienced a connection unlike anything in his human experience. Lena's empathic abilities created a feedback loop of sensation and emotion, each feeling amplified and reflected between them. It was as if the boundaries between them dissolved, leaving only a shared consciousness of pleasure and discovery. For the first time in decades, Malcolm felt truly alive, truly present. The weight of his past, the burden of his solitude, fell away in Lena's embrace. In her arms, he wasn't a fugitive or a traitor or an aging miner. He was simply a man, rediscovering what it meant to be human. Afterward, they lay entwined on the thermal blanket, Lena's head resting on Malcolm's chest. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat seemed to fascinate her. Your species has such strong hearts, she observed, her finger tracing patterns on his skin. Malcolm chuckled. Necessary equipment for a high-gravity world. Not just physically, she said. Your capacity for feeling, it's remarkable. So intense, so unfiltered. Is that a compliment or a criticism? Lena propped herself up on one elbow, her silver-white hair cascading over her blue shoulders. Definitely a compliment. My people often lose themselves in empathic connections, becoming mirrors rather than individuals. But humans, you feel everything so completely, so authentically. Malcolm brushed a strand of hair from her face. Never thought of it that way. A distant rumble interrupted the moment, the sound of machinery echoing through the tunnels. Malcolm tensed, instinctively reaching for his plasma cutter. Company equipment, he said, listening carefully. Regular mining operations, not a search party, but it means they're working closer than I expected. Lena sat up, concern evident in her expression. Smart, we're not safe here. We're safe enough for now, Malcolm reassured her, though his mind was already calculating risks and contingencies. But you're right, we can't stay indefinitely. As he held Lena close, Malcolm realized that for the first time in 15 years, he was thinking beyond mere survival. He was planning a future, one that included someone else. The thought was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Outside their hidden sanctuary, the Baron's hunters would be intensifying their search. But in this moment, wrapped in Lena's embrace, Malcolm felt a resolve hardening within him. His military training, his years of survival instincts, All of it would now serve a purpose beyond his own continued existence. He would protect her, whatever it took. After 2 days in the abandoned mine shaft, Malcolm knew they needed to make a move. Their supplies were dwindling, and the sounds of mining operations were growing closer each shift. He fingered the emergency beacon Grix had given him, turning it over in his calloused hands. "You're going to use it," Lena observed, not a question but a statement. She sat cross-legged on the thermal blanket, her silver-white hair braided to keep it from the mine dust. Even in these harsh conditions, she maintained a grace that fascinated Malcolm. "Don't have much choice," he admitted. "We can't stay here, and we can't go back to the settlement without help." Lena moved behind him, her slender blue arms encircling his waist. The casual intimacy of the gesture still surprised him. How quickly they had fallen into this comfortable rhythm together, as if they'd known each other for years instead of days. "Your friend Grick," she said, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You trust him?" "As much as I trust anyone," Malcolm replied. "Palladians have their own code. Once they consider a debt owed, they'll move mountains to repay it. And he believes he owes you." Malcolm nodded. "Saved him from a tunnel collapse last year. Nearly got crushed myself in the process." "Always the hero," Lena murmured, pressing a kiss to his weathered cheek. Malcolm snorted. "Hardly. Just doing what needed doing. That's what makes you different," she insisted. Most beings in this settlement would have walked past me hanging on that pole. You didn't." He turned to face her, struck again by the luminous quality of her twilight eyes. "Couldn't leave you there. Simple as that." Their lips met in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened. Malcolm marveled at how responsive she was to his touch, how her empathic abilities seemed to anticipate his desires before he fully formed them himself. Their connection had only grown stronger since their first intimate encounter, each subsequent joining more profound than the last. Later, as they lay entwined on the thermal blanket, Malcolm activated the beacon. A soft pulse confirmed the signal was transmitting. "Now we wait," he said, pulling Lena closer against the chill of the mine. They didn't wait long. Within hours, a subtle disturbance in the air currents signaled someone's approach. Malcolm grabbed his plasma cutter, positioning himself between the tunnel entrance and Lena. "Easy, human," came Grix's familiar gravelly voice. "It's just me. And friends." The Palladian emerged into the chamber, his rocky skin catching the blue light from the heater. Behind him came 2 other figures, a spindly Arcturian with 4 arms and compound eyes, and a hulking Denebian whose thick hide was covered in intricate tattoos. "This is Nyx," Grix indicated the Arcturian, "and Corva." The Denebian nodded. "They hate the Baron as much as you do." Malcolm lowered his weapon, but remained wary. "How'd you find us?" "Your beacon has a directional signal," Grix explained, "and I know these tunnels almost as well as you do." Nyx stepped forward, his compound eyes reflecting the light in prismatic patterns. "The Baron's men tore apart your dwelling," he said, his voice a high-pitched chittering. "They're offering 10,000 credits for information leading to your capture, dead or alive." "Mostly dead," Corva added, her deep voice rumbling through the chamber. Malcolm exchanged a glance with Lena. "Sounds like we've made an impression." "More than you know," Grix said. "Word spreading through the settlement. The human who defied the Baron. Some are calling you crazy. Others," he paused, "are calling you inspiration." "I'm no revolutionary," Malcolm protested. "Maybe not," Corva interjected, "but you've given people hope. The Barons ruled through fear for too long." Nyx's antennae twitched excitedly. "There are others who want to help. Miners, service workers, even some of the company's security who are tired of the Baron's bribes and threats." Malcolm ran a hand through his short-cropped gray hair. "I appreciate the sentiment, but what we need is a way off this rock. The Baron's reach is too long here." "That's why we came," Grix said. "Supply ship docks tomorrow at 0600. It's our best chance." "The Baron will have his men watching the docks," Lena pointed out. Corva's tattooed face split in what might have been a smile. "That's where the rest of us come in. Distraction. A coordinated series of incidents," Nyx elaborated, his chittering taking on an almost gleeful quality. "Nothing too destructive, but enough to spread the Baron's forces thin. Malcolm considered the plan. It was risky, but with the right timing, it might work. "And you're all willing to put yourselves on the line for us? Why?" Grix's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Not just for you. For ourselves. The Baron's stranglehold on this settlement affects everyone. Your defiance has shown that he's not invincible. Besides," Corva added, "humans aren't the only species with a sense of justice." Malcolm felt Lena's hand slip into his, a silent show of support. He squeezed it gently before addressing the group. "All right, if we're doing this, we need to be smart about it. I wasn't special forces for nothing." He knelt down, using his finger to draw a rough map of the settlement in the mine dust. "Let's talk specifics." For the next hour, they planned their escape. Nyx would coordinate communications between resistance members using modified mining equipment. Corva and several other Denibians would create the primary distraction at the processing plant. Nothing damaging enough to harm production, but sufficient to draw security. Grix would secure their path to the docking bay where the supply ship would land. "The ship's captain is a Rigelian named Tarn," Grix explained. "He's no friend of the Baron. I've arranged passage for you both, but it'll cost everything you've saved." Malcolm nodded grimly. 15 years of careful frugality, gone in an instant. But what good was a nest egg if you weren't alive to spend it? "Worth every credit," he said. As their new allies prepared to leave, Lena approached them, her twilight eyes solemn. "I sense your courage," she said, her melodic voice carrying in the chamber. "And your fear. I want you to know that among my people, to risk oneself for another's freedom is considered the highest form of honor." The alien seemed moved by her words, even Corva's stoic expression softening slightly. "The Baron never forgives," Nyx chittered, "but neither do we forget those who help us." After they departed, Malcolm and Lena began gathering their meager possessions. Tomorrow would determine everything: freedom or capture, life or death. "Are you afraid?" Lena asked as they prepared for their final night in the mine. Malcolm considered the question. "Not of dying. Been ready for that since Rigel 7. He pulled her close, breathing in her alien scent that had become so familiar, so necessary. "But I am afraid of losing this. Losing you, just when I found something worth living for again." Lena's eyes shimmered with emotion. "In my culture, we have a belief. When two souls connect as deeply as ours have, they remain joined across time and space. Whatever happens tomorrow," Malcolm read, "we are bound together now." As they settled down for the night, Malcolm found himself hoping, truly hoping, for the first time in 15 years, not just for survival, but for a future with Lena, somewhere far from Proxima 4 and the Baron's reach. Tomorrow would tell if such hopes were foolish or founded. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of the abandoned mine, with Lena's warmth beside him, Malcolm allowed himself to dream. Dawn on Proxima 4 arrived with the planet's characteristic blood-red haze filtering through the atmosphere. Malcolm and Lena emerged from the abandoned mineshaft cautiously, every sense alert for danger. They had spent the night in each other's arms, their passion tinged with the bittersweet knowledge that it might be their last night together. "Ready?" Malcolm asked, checking his plasma cutter's charge one final time. Lena nodded, her silver-white hair tucked beneath a miner's cap Grix had provided. She wore a set of standard-issue coveralls that hung loosely on her slender frame, on a part of their disguise as they made their way to the docking bay. "I can sense great anxiety throughout the settlement," she said, her twilight eyes distant as her empathic abilities reached out. "The Baron's forces are agitated." "Good. Means our friends are doing their part." Malcolm took her hand. "Stay close." They followed a circuitous route toward the settlement, avoiding the main paths. According to the plan, Nyx and his associates would trigger the first distraction at precisely 0530, a series of minor malfunctions in the processing plant's systems that would draw security away from the docking bay. The distant wail of alarms confirmed the plan was in motion. "Right on schedule," Malcolm muttered approvingly. They skirted the edge of the settlement, keeping to the shadows of the prefab units. The normally busy pathways were nearly deserted, most miners either on shift or wisely staying indoors with trouble brewing. As they approached the central plaza, A massive explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. Malcolm pulled Lena into the shelter of a supply shed, his body instinctively shielding hers. "That wasn't part of the plan," he growled, peering around the corner. The processing plant's auxiliary power unit was in flames, black smoke billowing into the red sky. Security forces and emergency response teams rushed toward the blaze. "Corva's work?" Lena asked, her voice tight with concern. Malcolm frowned. "Too big. They were supposed to create a distraction, not actual damage." He activated the small communicator Nix had provided. "Grix, what's happening?" Static crackled before the Palladian's gravelly voice came through. "Baron's forces intercepted Corva," she improvised. "Is she alive but captured? Move quickly. Path to Bay 3 is clear. I'll meet you there." Malcolm's jaw tightened. The stakes had just risen dramatically. "Come on, he said to Lena. "We need to move." They hurried through the now chaotic settlement, the emergency providing perfect cover for their movement. As they approached the docking area, Malcolm spotted the supply ship, a battered but serviceable interstellar freighter that represented their ticket to freedom. Grix was waiting at the maintenance entrance to Bay 3, his rocky features set in grim determination. "The captain's ready," he reported, "but there's a problem. The Baron himself is here." Malcolm's blood ran cold. "Where?" "Main terminal. He brought his personal guard, 6 Taurian enforcers." Grix handed Malcolm a small package. "Your new identities and passage confirmation. The ship leaves in 15 minutes, with or without you." "What about Corva?" Lena asked. "The others are working on it," Grix assured her. "This is bigger than just your escape now. The Baron's response to the distraction was excessive. He's ordered a settlement-wide lockdown. People are pushing back." Malcolm processed this information quickly. What had begun as their personal escape had somehow catalyzed a full-blown rebellion against the Baron's tyranny. "We can't just leave them to fight our battle," he said, the soldier in him resurfacing. "This isn't just your battle anymore," Grix countered. "It's everyone's. The best thing you can do is get on that ship." A series of shouts from the main terminal interrupted them. Through the bay windows, Malcolm could see a commotion unfolding. A group of miners, humans and aliens alike, were confronting a Taurian enforcer, their voices raised in protest. Then he saw him, the Baron. Even from a distance, the Taurian crime lord was imposing, his massive horned frame towering over the protesters. His voice boomed across the docking bay. "This settlement exists by my grace. Those who defy me will serve as examples." The Baron grabbed one of the protesters, a young human woman, and lifted her by the throat. Something snapped in Malcolm. 15 years of keeping his head down, of strategic retreat, of running from his past, all of it crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. "Get Lena to the ship," he ordered Grix, pressing the passage documents into the Palladian's hand. "Malcolm, no!" Lena grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "You can't face him alone." "I'm not running anymore," Malcolm said, his voice steady. "And I won't be alone." He nodded toward the growing crowd of protesters. "The Baron's reign ends today." "Then I stand with you," Lena declared, her slender blue fingers intertwining with his weathered ones. Malcolm wanted to argue, to insist she save herself, but the determination in her twilight eyes told him it would be futile. They were in this together now, bound by something stronger than fear. "We need a plan," Grix rumbled, accepting their decision. Malcolm's military training kicked in, assessing the situation with practiced efficiency. The Baron's focused on making an example. He's not expecting a coordinated attack. He turned to Lena. "Can you use your empathic abilities to sense which of his guards might be weakest? Most afraid?" Lena closed her eyes, concentrating. "The one on his left. He's, uncertain, conflicted." "Good. Grix, get word to Nix. Tell him to gather everyone who's willing to fight. We need numbers." Malcolm checked his plasma cutter again. The Baron's power comes from fear. Once people see he can be challenged, that fear turns to courage. As Grix relayed the message, Malcolm pulled Lena close, pressing his forehead to hers in an intimate gesture. "Last chance to get on that ship," he murmured. "My place is with you," she replied simply. "Whatever comes." Their lips met in a fierce kiss, a promise of all that could be if they survived the next few minutes. The communicator crackled. "Everyone's in position," Grix reported. "Nix says you just need to give the signal." Malcolm took a deep breath. 15 years of careful anonymity about to end in spectacular fashion. "Tell them to watch for my move." With Lena and Grix flanking him, Malcolm stepped out from the maintenance entrance into the main terminal. The Baron still held the young woman aloft, her feet dangling as she struggled for breath. "Baron!" Malcolm's voice carried across the terminal, silencing the crowd. "Remember me?" The Taurian's head swiveled, his yellow eyes narrowing as they fixed on Malcolm. Recognition dawned, followed by a cruel smile that revealed rows of sharp teeth. "The human who stole my property," the Baron growled, dropping the woman who scrambled away, gasping. "And my property herself. How convenient." "She's not property," Malcolm replied, his voice steady as he advanced, "and neither is anyone else in this settlement." The Baron laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Brave words from a dead man. Do you know what I do to thieves, human? Do you know what I did to the last bully who threatened innocent lives?" Malcolm countered, his hand tightening on his plasma cutter. Something in his tone gave the Baron pause. For the first time, the alien crime lord seemed to truly look at the aging human before him, to see beyond the miner's coveralls to the soldier beneath. "Who are you?" the Baron demanded. Malcolm smiled grimly. "Just a man who's tired of running." With that, he raised his plasma cutter and fired, not at the Baron, but at the sprinkler system above the Taurian's head. Water rained down, creating instant chaos and providing the signal the resistance had been waiting for. From all sides, miners and settlement workers surged forward. The Baron's guards found themselves surrounded, outnumbered by determined faces, no longer cowed by fear. The battle for Proxima 4 had begun. Chaos erupted in the docking terminal. The Baron roared in fury as water cascaded down, drenching his horned head and expensive garments. His personal guards moved to protect him, forming a defensive circle, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of miners and settlement workers who surged forward from all directions. Malcolm advanced steadily, his plasma cutter held at the ready. Years of military training took over, his movements precise and confident despite his age. Beside him, Lena moved with fluid grace, her empathic abilities allowing her to anticipate attacks before they came. "The human thinks he can challenge me?" the Baron bellowed, drawing a wicked-looking energy weapon from his belt. "I've crushed rebellions before." "Not like this one," Malcolm replied calmly. "Not against people with nothing left to lose." All around them, the battle raged. Grix was a force of nature, his rocky form absorbing blows that would have felled others. Nix darted between combatants, his four arms wielding improvised weapons with deadly efficiency. Even the ship's captain, a grizzled Rigelian named Tarn, had joined the fray, his crew backing him up with mining tools and cargo hooks. The Baron fired his weapon, the energy blast narrowly missing Malcolm's head. The old soldier didn't flinch, continuing his advance with the steady determination that had once made him one of Earth's finest. "Your reign ends today," Malcolm stated, not as a threat but as a simple fact. Something flickered in the Baron's yellow eyes, an emotion Malcolm recognized from countless battlefields. Fear. For all his bluster and cruelty, the Baron had never faced true resistance, had never been challenged by those he oppressed. "Kill them all," the Baron ordered his remaining guards, but his voice lacked conviction. One guard hesitated, the one Lena had identified as conflicted. In that moment of indecision, Corva, who had broken free in the commotion, tackled him from behind. The other guards found themselves surrounded, outmatched by the determined settlers fighting for their freedom. The Baron, seeing his protection crumbling, made a desperate lunge at Malcolm, his massive form barreling forward with surprising speed. Malcolm sidestepped, using the Taurian's momentum against him, a move he'd learned decades ago in close-quarters combat training. The Baron stumbled off balance, and Malcolm delivered a precise strike with the butt of his plasma cutter to the base of the alien skull. Not enough to kill, but sufficient to stun. The massive Taurian crashed to the floor, his weapon skittering across the terminal. A hush fell over the crowd as Malcolm stood over the fallen Baron. The Taurian crime lord looked up, his yellow eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you waiting for?" the Baron growled. "Finish it." Malcolm considered the alien at his feet. It would be easy. One quick blast from his plasma cutter and the Baron's reign of terror would end permanently. After all the suffering he'd caused, few would question such justice. "That's not who I am," Malcolm said finally, lowering his weapon. "And it's not who these people are." He turned to the gathered crowd. "The Baron ruled through fear and cruelty. If we execute him, we become what we fought against." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Even those who had suffered most under the Baron's rule seemed to recognize the wisdom in Malcolm's words. "What then?" asked Nix, his compound eyes reflecting the terminal lights in prismatic patterns. "Justice," Malcolm replied. "A trial. Let him face the consequences of his actions according to law, not vengeance." The Baron was secured by several miners, his wrists bound with mining cable. His once fearsome presence now diminished. He seemed almost pathetic, a bully exposed for the coward he truly was. As the immediate danger passed, the reality of what they had accomplished began to sink in. The settlement was free. For the first time in years, its residents could determine their own fate. "What happens now?" someone asked. All eyes turned to Malcolm, the reluctant hero who had catalyzed their liberation. He shifted uncomfortably under their expectant gazes. "That's for you to decide," he said. "Form a council. Elect leaders. Build something better than what you had before." "And you?" Grix rumbled, his four eyes blinking in sequence. "Will you lead us?" Malcolm looked at Lena, her twilight eyes meeting his with understanding. He took her hand, feeling the delicate blue fingers intertwine with his weathered ones. "No," he said gently. "My path lies elsewhere." A murmur of disappointment ran through the crowd, but Corva stepped forward, her tattooed face solemn. "The human has given us our freedom," she declared in her deep voice. "We cannot ask more of him." Captain Tarn cleared his throat. "My ship still leaves in 10 minutes. Anyone with passage is welcome aboard." Malcolm nodded gratefully to the Regalian. "We'll be there." As the crowd dispersed, beginning the work of securing the settlement and organizing their new freedom, Malcolm, Lena, and their closest allies gathered near the maintenance entrance. "You could stay," Grix said. "Help build what you started." Malcolm shook his head. "I've been running for 15 years. It's time I stopped running and started living." He glanced at Lena with a smile. "We both deserved that chance." "Where will you go?" Nix chittered curiously. "Rigel 3, Captain Tarn interjected. "My home port. Beautiful place. Good mix of species. No questions asked about your past." He winked one of his three eyes. "Perfect for a fresh start." "Sounds ideal," Malcolm agreed. They said their goodbyes quickly. There wasn't time for lengthy farewells. Grix, Nix, and Corva would form the core of the settlement's new leadership, along with representatives from each species. "The Baron never forgives," Corva said, echoing the ominous sign that had started everything. "But we will never forget what you've done for us." As Malcolm and Lena boarded the supply ship, the captain showed them to a small but comfortable cabin. "It's not luxury," Tarn apologized, "but it's private." "It's perfect," Lena assured him. Once alone, Malcolm pulled Lena into his arms, the tension of the past days finally releasing. She melted against him, her slender form fitting perfectly against his sturdy frame. "I can't believe we made it," he murmured into her silver-white hair. "I never doubted," she replied, her melodic voice vibrating against his chest. "From the moment you cut me down from that pole, I knew you were different." The ship's engines rumbled to life beneath them, the vibration a promise of departure, of escape, of new beginnings. "What happens now?" Malcolm asked, echoing the question from the terminal, but with a different meaning entirely. Lena's twilight eyes sparkled with mischief and promise. "Now, Malcolm Reed, we live. Together." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the passion of their previous encounters, but with something new added: hope. No longer were they fugitives stealing moments of connection in a mineshaft. They were partners embarking on a future neither had dared imagine just days ago. As the ship lifted off from Proxima 4, leaving behind the red dust and harsh landscape, Malcolm gazed out the small viewport at the settlement below. Already changes were visible. The Baron's gaudy residence was being converted into a community center. the processing plant's operations resuming under new management. "One act of kindness," Lena observed, following his gaze. "Look at what it created." Malcolm pulled her closer. "I was just doing what needed doing." "That's what makes humans remarkable," she said, her fingers tracing the lines of his weathered face. "You see someone in need and you act. No calculations, no hesitation. Just humanity." The settlement disappeared from view as the ship angled toward the stars. Malcolm felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, the burden of his past, of his years in hiding, of his carefully maintained isolation. In its place was something he had almost forgotten: contentment. Later, as they lay entwined in the narrow bunk, their bodies cooling from the passionate affirmation of their survival and future, Malcolm marveled at the turn his life had taken. From a lonely miner avoiding human connection to a man in love, from a fugitive to a hero, from existing to truly living. "What are you thinking?" Lena asked, her head resting on his chest, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "That I'm the luckiest old fool in the galaxy," he replied honestly. She laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Age is just a number, Malcolm Reed. Your spirit is younger than most beings I've encountered." "Is that a cerulean compliment?" "It's a universal truth." She propped herself up on one elbow, her silver white hair cascading over her blue shoulders. "You humans have such capacity for renewal, for beginning again. It's inspiring." Malcolm brushed a strand of hair from her face, marveling at the softness of her skin. "We'll begin again on Rigel 3. Together." "Together," she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss. As the ship carried them toward their new life, Malcolm reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A lonely old human male miner and a humanoid alien girl hanging from a pole with a sign, "The Baron never forgives." The Baron might never forgive, but Malcolm had found something far more powerful: the capacity to care, to fight for what was right, and to love again when he thought that part of his life was over. As Lena drifted to sleep in his arms, Malcolm gazed at the stars streaking past their viewport. For the first time in 15 years, he looked forward to tomorrow.